Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Daily Friend Wrap. I am your host, Nicholas Lorimer, joined today by Makone and Maja. Let us get into the news of today. And the first thing we're going to talk about is a report from Afriforum about the state of the country's sewage treatment plants. So Afriforum looked at 140 sewage wastewater treatment works, which were releasing sewage that had been treated back into the water supply. There are standards which these sewage plants are supposed to clean the water to a certain amount before they release it back into the into the rivers and the natural water supply. And according to Afriforum's testing of these 140 ones that they looked at, 81% of them did not adhere to the minimum standards of cleaning the water. In other words, they're dumping sewage, essentially not adequately treated, back into the water supply, into the rivers, which then at some point will end up back in the drinking supply again. They started their report at the Vereniging's broken sewage plant, and their intention was to show the decay of the municipal sewage infrastructure over the last couple of years. Makone, this is one of those things that has very significant consequences, because if your electricity is off, yes, it hurts economic growth, yes, it causes lots of knock-on effects and suffering for people. But when you're dumping sewage back into the water supply, you can cause very serious disease outbreaks. We've already had an outbreak of cholera due to a water treatment plant in Hammanskraal that was not working correctly. What do you make of the story?
Sure, yeah, those are real concerns you're raising there, Nick. I think I'm firstly glad to see that there's an independent institution out there that's doing research on the condition of our wastewater treatment plants. I've had a gripe for a long time with the Green Drop Report, which is a score or a report that the Department of Water and Sanitation puts out to rank and score the condition of the South African municipalities' wastewater treatment plants. But the problem with the Green Drop risk rating, which is a score the Green Drop reports put out, measuring the condition and the performance of these municipal wastewater treatment plants, is that it's hidden in a mirage of other irrelevant factors. So, for example, you get a risk rating of, say, 60%, which is not too bad, right? The lower the score, the worse off you are. The higher the score, the far better you are. But the problem is that they use 5 measurements to measure the condition of this piece of infrastructure that carries wastewater, right? And among them are things like capital management, financial management, technical management. What, if anything, do those indicators tell you about the actual true state of the infrastructure that facilitates sewage in municipalities? Nothing, right? But there's one factor in there that does, and that's the effluent and sludge compliance score. And that's the one that I would like to see the Green Drop risk reports focus on, instead of weighing it across all those other indicators that are already listed, and then giving us a score that really conceals the true condition of wastewater treatment plants in South Africa. So I'm glad to see Afriforum doing this. They're not nearly where they need to be. 100 or 100, the number that you mentioned is not enough. I think we have far more than that. I think we have closer to 900 wastewater treatment plants, but I understand they probably have limited resources and that sort of things, inhibiting their ability to conduct widespread research. But again, seeing independent institutions carrying out these treatments of wastewater plants and as well as drinking water plants in South Africa. But it's true, one of the things the Green Drop risk report or Green Drop risk rating looks at is the environmental impact of wastewater or lack of maintenance on wastewater treatment plants. And that's a score that's very concerning to me, seeing that there's a lot of leakages that are happening as a result of lack of maintenance. But also that this has been an issue for a very long time. There are reports that go as far back as 2005, flagging various municipal wastewater treatment plants, like Percy Stewart is one, for example. I think it operates around the Maruping area, which was one of the 7 wonders of the world. But even wastewater treatment plants around some tourism areas of key importance in South Africa are not receiving the treatment that they require. That shows you the extent to which a lot of these things fall under the radar. So again, huge risks there, and glad to see like independent institutions conducting research in that area. And again, bringing to the forefront and to the discussion, to the public discussion, just how under threat we are, just not just as far as sewage water is concerned, but also the leakages into our drinking water.
Exactly. And I think, unfortunately, the only time that this story is really going to put itself front and center in the news, in the news cycle, is if there happens to be a spill in one of the big metros. And I mean that in the sort of not in some outlying area like Hammanskraal, but in sort of a middle class suburb or something like that. Then I fear that may be the only thing that it will take to get people actually to take some action on averting the situation. But hopefully we don't come to that. Okay, let's talk about our next story. And this is another report from an independent institute, this from the Institute for Security Studies, which was looking at South Africa's murder rate and has found that South Africa's murder rate is the highest it has been in 20 years, basically since the very bad period of the 90s, when there was a lot of murders, particularly kind of related to, some of them were probably political killings that were misidentified as murders. But since sort of 2011, 2012, the number of murders in the country has gone up from 15,000 per year to 27,000 last year, 77% rise, which is an absolutely crazy amount. The murder rate has also gone up over the past couple of years to about 58 per 100,000 people, which puts South Africa at one of the highest murder rates in the world. We are routinely in the top 10. There have been increases in basically every province, although interestingly, Gauteng has not fared as badly as some of the other provinces in terms of its increase in murder rate. It's only gone up by 40% in Gauteng. In other provinces like KZN, the Eastern Cape, and the Western Cape, it has soared. In terms of a per capita rate of murders, Gauteng is now the fourth highest, behind the Western Cape and Eastern Cape, KZN, and then Gauteng fourth. Makone, obviously this is not a great state of affairs, and once again we're seeing something where Minister Makone just seems to not be able to get a grasp on the situation. It's a massive number of people being killed per year.
Sure, it is insane, but I think nothing captures cadre deployment better than having a former Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestries go from being that to now Insecurity Minister of Police. Again, South Africa needs to go back to the basics. You cannot have a country with those insane levels of crime attracting investment and attracting capital, which will lead to growth, right? And that's why you see article after article coming out and saying that we're losing a lot of our high net worth individuals to countries like Namibia, where there's relatively very low levels of crime, as well as countries like Mauritius. So if we want to see economic growth in this country, it hinges on things like safety, which tend to fall under the radar, especially when you're having conversation around the economy or economic performance. But yeah, this pretty much sums up cadre deployment.
And unless we get a handle on cadre deployment, it's only going to continue to eat away the efficiency of the police service. Okay, let us get on to our last topic for today, and that is that a number of cardiologists are increasingly concerned about the implementation of the National Health Insurance Scheme. A cardiologist at Linksfield Clinic, who works sessions at the Charlotte Macleay Academic Hospital in Joburg, said that NHI is the elephant in the room. He said, quote, "Why should we trust the government with our money when there are no successful blueprints? Money has been poured into Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital and Charlotte Macleay, only for these hospitals to return to their former state of dilapidation. We have to ask why we must trust government, not just with money, but with aptitude and ability." These concerns, however, have been dismissed by, I guess, the sort of chief bureaucrat in charge of implementing the National Health Insurance, Dr. Nicholas Crisp, who is the Deputy Director General in the National Department of Health. Said this pervasive distrust has to stop. And he said that it was only with the private and public sectors working together that we could solve the problems in healthcare. Makone, I am not a huge fan of Dr. Nicholas Crisp. I don't think he's answered a lot of important questions about problems with NHI adequately, but what's your take on this?
I pay very close attention to the language that Nicholas Crisp refers or uses when he speaks about public health care. And there's a lot of entitlement there and a lot of tyrannical language being used about how people should spend their own money on their own health, right? There's just this claim that government thinks it has this level of control that is implied in this speech about how much people should be able to spend on their own healthcare. I think I would point people to the IRS submission to Parliament on the NHI. And one of the key items and takeaways I think people should observe in that submission is this idea that government spends 4% of our GDP, for example, on public health care. And it speaks about that as if it is mutually exclusive to taxpayer funds, right? And what the submission makes the case is that about 900,000 individuals in this country pay about 75% of the personal income taxes. So you have roughly 1 million people funding 70% of government's revenue. And so you cannot speak about those people choosing to use their money to spend on healthcare as if they don't have any interest in the public expenditure on healthcare, because they are your source. They are the ones who are going to fund the NHI over and above what they spend on their own public care. So I worry about his rhetoric and I pay close attention to it. But I also think I'm quite fed up with this distinction being made between government expenditure and how much people spend privately on their own healthcare, because government sources its income from private individuals. So essentially, private individuals are already funding public health care, despite it being very poor. That's not on the individual, that's on the government squandering public health care funding.
Exactly. And if you think that national health insurance can be implemented without it turning into essentially another nightmare version of ESCOM, except this time not with electricity, but with people's healthcare, I think you're deluding yourself. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Hope that you found the show interesting. That's a wrap.